Questions now about a big red wave in November, but new polling showing voters say Republicans are doing a better job on border security, crime, and the economy. Democrats lead on health care and abortion. But those social issues are likely less of a factor in deciding votes. They don't really ride with the same intensity level in people's lives. 59% say a candidate's position on managing the cost of living is their focus. That's compared with 37% who said the same thing about abortion. Former Clinton pollster Mark Penn says it's playing this way.
I think there are two elections going on. There's one about inflation, immigration, and crime. There's another about climate change, abortion, and racial justice. And you see that these races have tightened in the Democratic favor a little bit so far. I think you got to watch the polling in the next couple of weeks.
Power panel now, Gianno Caldwell, Fox News political analyst, and Leslie Marshall, Fox News contributor. Great to have you both. Gianno, I'm going to start with this. Voting rights for Democrats. Not saying it's not an important topic, but why in the world would people vote to keep Dems in the House if voting rights were an issue? How would they be able to do that?
Well, for one, I understand the importance of them, absolutely. But at the same time, people are more so focused on kitchen table issues. I'm looking at the polling, and I know it's going to tighten up as we get into October, but I'm reminded of what my good friend Marty Morris would often tell me, which is polls don't vote. And I'll tell you, with these polls that don't vote, the momentum is on the side of the Republicans. When you look at the kitchen table issues, people are much more considerate of that. When we look at the primaries that we just saw, more people voted, more Republicans voted in a primary. Democrats don't have that kind of momentum. I understand the abortion issue. I understand the Trump legal issues. But as we go in the coming weeks in October, I think those things are going to shift, and people will be very surprised how it turns out. And I think it's going to fall on the side of the Republicans.
Well, if it falls on the side of Republicans, Leslie, that's particularly difficult for Democrats. Not because they would necessarily outnumber them, but when you look at tracking, independents now are tracking closer with and alongside Republicans. Lee Carter is a guru in all of that, and we do that here on this program. We'll track, and we'll see the red and the yellow of independents tracking very separate from the blue line of Democrats. They are hanging together. That's a lot of people.
Well, you know, Gianno and I don't agree on everything, but I think there will be some surprises, because when we look at tracking, let's look at some tracking of registered voters since the Dobbs decision. You have nearly a 12% increase among women alone over men in October, in Ohio, and that is a complete flip. I mean, men have really dominated not just the midterm, but voting in general in that state. When you look among Latinos in New Mexico and you look at issues, all of a sudden social issues such as abortion are coming up, and since the gas prices have been going down, the economic issues for Latinos in New Mexico have been dropping, and the social issues like abortion have been rising. Look, the economy is #1 on everybody's plate.
Absolutely.
2, Democrats have not been coming out in the midterms historically. They do need to take a page out of the Republican playbook. But 3, I think women and the Dobbs decision are going to be much more of a deciding factor and a surprise as we see these races tighten as we get closer, because, as you said, we're not that far away from the midterms.
Do you think abortion, though, rides higher and hotter intensity level among voters, women or men, than food? I mean, inflation is like cooking at 68%.
No, I said economy is #1. Economy is #1.
But look at the difference between the intensity about those things. 68% of people agreeing on that. And you say, well, you've picked up about 13%. You're still below 50 on the issue of abortion in terms of polling. Gianno, real quick.
Yeah, real quick. I mean, in baby formula, too, right? That was a consideration for suburban moms. Now, I got to tell you, when Leslie mentions registered voters, we got to be looking at the likely voters, because this last election cycle, there were people who stood home because they didn't like Trump or Biden. But now these folks have felt the effect of the Biden policies and the Democrats as a whole, and they have something to say about it. So I think when we're talking about these issues, there has to be a consistent tone as to what has happened, because a lot of times people forget about the problems that people have faced and been caused by the Biden administration, and people are going to let their voices be heard when they go in that voting booth for the midterms, and I don't think it's going to look too good for Democrats. I'm going to be honest.
Well, it's interesting, too, because if you want to stop somebody, then you put up a wall of opposition to that person. persons. So the more seats that Republicans pick up, and particularly a majority in the House and or Senate, then yeah, that does exactly what you're talking about. It's not that you have two candidates in a presidential to go against each other. You have local politicians that you might be able to help put up that firewall against the president. Let's move. Crime is plaguing Democrat-led Philadelphia again, always. Murders there ticking up slightly. Already 388 murders so far this year. And all violent crimes up nearly 7% over last year. The city's district attorney is facing a recall effort over the crisis. The issue of crime playing a big part in the key Pennsylvania Senate race. Democrat candidate John Fetterman, you see here, had said some things about criminals, and now his campaign is doing some damage control. Last year, that lieutenant governor pushed for eliminating life without parole for some prisoners convicted of second-degree murder. Fetterman tweeted, "Mercy must be a partner to justice," his campaign telling Fox yesterday. He believes there are people who deserve to spend the rest of their life in prison for the crimes they've committed, but the decision to do this should be left to the judges and parole boards, not politicians in Harrisburg. Gianno.
You know, this reminds me of what they're doing in the state of Illinois with the Safety Act, where they're going to eliminate cash bail, be the first state in the country to eliminate cash bail for most offenses, including second-degree murder. Mr. Fetterman, I think, has opened a Pandora's box that's going to hunt him, because people want those who have killed, murdered their family members to remain in jail. So I think he needs to watch himself when he's talking about these very weighty issues that impact people's lives, especially when we're seeing a crime spree across the country and in Philadelphia, where a lot of African Americans live, and where those people would be impacted by this get out of free jail card for second-degree murder.
Leslie.
Well, it's interesting that Gianna brought up the victims, because in the specific program that would affect 1,200 individuals that Fetterman was talking about, and has rightly, as you rightly pointed out, Harris backpedaled on that in recent days. But this program would actually include decisions among victims' families, because there are some victims' families, interestingly enough, more so in the African-American community, where the victim and the perpetrator are both African-American, and where the perpetrator was a youth, and they feel that if there have been some certainly remorse,
so
rehabilitation,
Leslie, real quick, we got to go. I have to ask this question.
They do deserve second chance.
So if that's such a great idea, then why is Fetterman and all of his team, why are they all backing away from this right before the election? Just real quick, and then we're going to go.
I didn't say it was a great idea. I think that
well, you were
people
defending
just,
it. You were talking in detail as if it were.
He wants to let out.
It did sound
well,
like
he wants to let all these people with second-degree murders, and that's not.
And you included black people for supporting it. So I'm just wondering why you lay that out, and why Fetterman would say at this point, denying that it's a good idea and having his team defend. I think it's a pertinent question. So we'll see how that race plays out. Leslie, Gianno, thank you very much. Good to see you on the panel.
Thank you.